Growing up, $100,000 sounded like the finish line. The number had a glow to it. It meant you made it. It meant the kind of life where you didn't rehearse conversations with your bank account before you bought anything fun. But here we are in 2026, and six figures doesn't feel like rich. For a lot of people, it doesn't even feel like safe. It feels like you finally got your head above water and then realized the tide is still rising. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The number didn't change. Life did. Prices climbed. Rules shifted. And the cost of simply existing moved into a different league. If you've ever looked at your paycheck and thought, where is it going? You're not imagining things. Let's start with the simplest punch in the gut. Inflation. Not the scary headline version. The slow, sticky kind that changes your life quietly. A $100,000 salary buys about what roughly $53,000 bought around the year 2000. That's not a metaphor, that's math. So if you're sitting there thinking, wait, I did everything right, I got the degree, I got the job, I'm at six figures, why do I still feel squeezed? It's because your brain is comparing your 100,000 to the world your parents lived in. And the world your parents lived in is gone. There's a name for where a lot of Americans are stuck right now. It's the zone that doesn't have a safety net, but also doesn't have breathing room. You make too much to qualify for help, but not enough to build real stability. You're not broke in the traditional sense. But you're also one surprise expense away from panic. That's the comfort gap, the weird middle zone where you can pay your bills until you can't, where you look fine on paper, but the smallest crack in your month can break the whole thing. And if you think this is just people being dramatic on the internet, consider this. In some of the most expensive parts of the country, even a six-figure income can be treated as low. Income for certain housing thresholds, depending on household size and county. Now, that doesn't mean you're living in poverty the way the word is usually used. It means the ground has shifted so far that the official lines had to move with it. Today, we're not talking about luxury. We're not talking about fancy cars or dream vacations. We're talking about the price of admission to a normal American life in 2026 and why, for millions of people, 100,000 is starting to feel like the new minimum wage. And once you see where the money is actually going, you'll never look at that number the same way again. Let's talk about the three biggest categories that quietly eat modern paychecks alive: housing, food, and childcare. These aren't bad habits. These aren't latte problems. These are basic life expenses that have grown teeth. Start with housing, because housing sets the tone for everything else. Housing is the bill that decides whether your life feels calm or chaotic. Inflation cooled compared to the worst stretch earlier in the decade, but housing didn't suddenly get affordable. In many places, shelter costs kept rising, and even when growth slows, it's slowing from a peak that's already brutal. If you rent, you feel it directly. If you own, you feel it through rates, insurance, repairs, and the fact that starter homes now come with luxury-level price tags. Mortgage rates came down from the highest spikes, but the average 30-year fixed rate still sits in a range that makes monthly payments heavy. That's not pocket change. That's the difference between maybe and no chance for a lot of buyers. Meanwhile, home prices didn't crash into affordability. In many places, they didn't even meaningfully correct. The market didn't reset so much as pause. Flat can still be unaffordable when flat happens at record highs. That's why stabilized can feel like a prank. Stabilized doesn't mean cheaper. Stabilized means the price stopped sprinting after it already ran away from you. So if you didn't buy before the big run-up earlier in the decade, you may be stuck renting longer than you ever planned. And rent is not just a bill. Rent is a wealth transfer. It's the monthly trade of your future for your present. In the highest cost markets, rent can swallow a paycheck whole. And it's not just a San Francisco problem or a New York problem anymore. It's spreading. There are now many markets where you need around $100,000 just to rent a typical place without crossing the standard rent burden line. 6 figures just to rent normally. Now layer in food, the bill that hits you multiple times a day. Here's what makes food inflation feel different. It's not only about whether prices go up this month, it's that price jumps stick around. Even when some items dip, the overall cart doesn't feel lighter because families don't buy one item. They buy a week of life. This is what people mean when they talk about cumulative inflation, the lived experience. Prices go up, and then they don't come back down in a way that matters to your budget. The spike becomes the new floor. Then comes childcare. If you don't have kids, you may not feel this one directly. But it's shaping the economy around you anyway, because it changes who can work, how families plan their lives, and what middle class even means. In many states, infant childcare can cost more than in-state college tuition. And for two kids, childcare can rival or exceed housing payments depending on where you live. So when someone says, we make 100,000 and we're still drowning, it's not because they're bad with money. It's because housing takes the first bite, childcare takes the second, food takes the third, and by the time you get to the rest of life, transportation, health, debt, savings, the plate is already empty. And if this is hitting close to home, you're not alone. If you want more breakdowns like this that don't talk down to you, subscribe. Not because it fixes the problem, but because understanding the problem is one of the only ways to stop blaming yourself for it. Now let's talk about the costs. Older generations didn't have to budget for the same way. Costs that aren't luxuries anymore, even if they used to be. Call them the new essentials, the modern bills you can't realistically opt out of. Start with the tech utility. In 2000, the internet was a nice to have for a lot of households. Cell phones were cool, but not required for survival. In 2026, you can lose a job opportunity because your Wi-Fi is unstable. You can miss a shift because you didn't see a scheduled change. You can get locked out of healthcare portals, school portals, banking portals, work portals. Your whole life is portals now, so you pay for it like you pay for electricity. Add broadband, add a phone plan, add device payments, add the fact that many jobs require a functional laptop, and suddenly you're spending a few $100s a month just to participate in society, not to flex, not to keep up, to function. Then comes the subscription layer. This is the part people love to mock. Cancel your streaming services, stop ordering delivery. But here's the deeper truth. Modern life is designed to be rented. You don't buy software once, you subscribe. You don't buy a movie collection, you pay monthly for access. Storage, security, work tools, kids apps, password managers, everything is a recurring fee. And a dozen small monthly charges can drain a paycheck in a way that's hard to feel until it's too late. It's not one $200 bill, it's 20 $12 bills that quietly become a much bigger bill. Now, healthcare. This is the one that turns middle-class budgets into glass. Even with good insurance, many people live in a reality where they pay premiums every month and still have to cover thousands of dollars before insurance truly helps. So when someone says, I have insurance and I'm still scared to go to the doctor, it's not irrational, it's learned. That's the new essentials problem in one sentence. The baseline cost of being a working adult has expanded, and it expanded faster than wages did. Now we need to face the illusion at the center of this whole story, what 100,000 actually looks like in real life. 6 figures is a headline number. It's a recruiting number. It's a brag number. But you don't live on gross pay. You live on what hits your account. Depending on where you live and your household situation, a $100,000 salary can land. In your bank account looking more like the equivalent of the mid-$60,000 to mid-$70,000 range after federal and payroll taxes, and then state taxes in many places. Monthly, your $8,333 becomes something closer to around $5,000 to $6,500, and that range matters because your biggest bills don't care that your salary is 6 figures. They only care what's available after taxes. Remember housing. If you're paying $2,500 to $3,500 in rent, that's not unusual in many metro areas, and it's normal in some. In certain cities, one-bedroom rents can sit above $3,000 a month. Once housing takes half your monthly net, everything else becomes a fight. This is why people feel like 100,000 is the new minimum wage, because the lifestyle that 6 figures used to buy is now reserved for a different tier. You'll also hear headlines saying real wages are up, and there have been periods of real wage growth. But a small improvement is a cup of water. On the bonfire if your biggest costs jumped earlier and never came back down, if your rent reset higher, if your insurance premium climbed, if childcare got more expensive, if groceries repriced your entire week, a modest raise can be real on paper and still be irrelevant in your budget. Then there's the cultural shift. Nobody wants to say out loud, the side hustle didn't become trendy, it became necessary. For many households, 100,000 isn't one salary anymore. It's a target total household income. 2 adults working, plus freelance work, plus weekend gigs, plus selling time that used to belong to rest. And that has an emotional cost. Because when you're working all the time and still not building stability, you start to feel like the problem is you. It's not you. When huge numbers of renter households spend more than 30% of their income on housing, that's not a personal failure, that's a system signal. So what now? The point isn't to leave you with dread. The point is to give you language for what you're living through and a strategy that doesn't rely on magical thinking. First, redefine what wealth means. In the old dream, wealth looked like stuff. The nicer car, the bigger home, the brand name everything. In 2026, the flex is stability. It's having an emergency fund that can take a hit without breaking. It's being able to take a day off without your whole month collapsing. It's being able to handle a medical bill without going into debt. Time is the new luxury. Predictability is the new luxury. Second, stop using gross income as your scoreboard. A 100,000 salary in one city can be a totally different life than 100,000 in another. A better metric is what your net income looks like after housing. Housing is the bill that determines whether the rest of your financial plan is even possible. Third, be honest about wage growth in modern America. For many people, the biggest raises don't come from loyalty, they come from leverage. Job hopping isn't always fun, it can be stressful, it can feel risky, but in a world where prices can move faster than annual merit increases, the math can push people toward bigger jumps, not smaller steps. And finally, sometimes the city is the problem. If your area requires a six-figure income just to rent without being rent-burdened, it's not a moral failure to consider relocating. It's a rational response to a structural reality. That doesn't mean everyone can move. Jobs, family, custody, community, those are real anchors. But it does mean you shouldn't internalize a structural problem as personal shame. Because here's the bottom line. 100,000 is starting to feel like the new minimum wage because the price of admission to the American middle class has doubled. Not overnight, not in one dramatic moment, but in a slow grind of higher housing costs, higher recurring bills, higher new essentials, and wage growth that rarely keeps pace with the real world. So don't let the number fool you. Do the math, tell the truth, and protect your peace like it's an asset, because it is. Before you go, if you've ever had a moment where a single grocery item made you stop and think, oh, this is permanent, drop it in the comments. What was that item for you? And if you want more straight talk breakdowns like this, no shame, no fluff, subscribe.